Sunday Roundup, and I'm joined tonight by two guests. Andrew Craig, the head of the Justice Integrity Project here in Washington, and John Edward Hurley, who heads up the Clendon Group, a journalistic group that meets frequently at the National Press Club. And before the break, we were talking about the revolving door of lobbyists, and that's just that we heard McCain, for example, talking about this iron triangle of industry, lobbyists, and government. And yet, how much money did he take in his presidential run from the likes of airlines and telecom companies, and Obama too? He's obviously took tons of money from Wall Street, from Goldman Sachs, from J.P. Morgan, and others. And Andy, you've seen how this lobbying works here, and there's been no change, even though the rhetoric of the campaign from both McCain and Obama sounded like they were going to crack down on lobbyists.
Well, exactly. One is somebody just did a report that the number of people leaving the Obama administration going to work for lobbying firms and lobbying-like firms is higher than any other administration. More people have left. It's only a little over 2 years, but more people have left per time period and gone to work for lobbying firms than ever in history. So there's your change. McCain, he had some very important hearings on that ostensibly put the blast on Boeing in a major Air Force tanker procurement. But as you've written, Wayne, his presidential campaign was staffed with top lobbyists for the rival manufacturer, EADS, and it just permeates Washington, and it's not simply things that you can track, because, Wayne, to toss you a little bouquet here, one thing people don't track is family members who become lobbyists. And you initiated on your website a Washington journalism incest chart.
Right.
And why don't you go into that? Let me play host here for a second. But it was a great innovation because
Andy, if we lose the line, and you may have to be the host, so it's good.
Well, I'll keep talking about it because it's a very important innovation you did, because while it's hard enough to track people who actually changed their stripes themselves, but what you did was you put down, well, okay, here's a journalist, but do they have a spouse who's making 4 times as much as a lobbyist? Absolutely, and it just goes to show conflicts of interest in this town are just unbelievable. And I know, John, you've looked at this connection of lobbyists to these individuals, including lobbyists and like the American Trucking Association and others who have just been so endemic. David Addington, who was Cheney's chief of staff, was high up in that lobbying organization, a trucking organization. And as I've written, there's a connection between the trucking industry in this country and the transport of illegal drugs.
Well, I mean, that's excuse me for using a trite expression, but it's the tip of the iceberg. I mentioned Nancy Dorn. She was married to Jim Whittinghill, who was embraced by the Lord last year. But as I said, why they came in was to take care of Iran-Contra. Then later on, right now she's vice president for government relations, and then she's working with this guy William Rist, who is the vice president of government relations for American Airlines. It never ends. But there's one really hoodoo that I think illustrates how it's so hard to keep track of Washington. You've heard all this talk lately about earmarks,
Earmarks, right?
We don't like earmarks.
Everyone,
earmarks
yeah, they don't like earmarks as long as they're in the other guy's congressional district, but they're okay in their own.
Well, let me just tell you how this works. This is part of the leisure domain that you could expect from Washington. But you have people on both sides talking about earmarks. Nobody wants to defend earmarks, right? Well, under the law up until recently that had to do with earmarks, you see, essentially senators and congressmen were getting unvoted on appropriations for their districts. So that's what they were doing. That's essentially what it was. However, as one of the poor, curious taxpayers, while this was going on, you see, I could look at a database which was public, and I could look at my congressman, my senator, and list them,
Right.
They do. Now, some of them would be favorable to, as far as the constituency is concerned. They wouldn't be upset with it, But anyway.
Hold that thought, John. We'll be right back and hear more about the earmarks right after this short break. This is Wayne Madsen from Washington.